right, so the next lesson in this relations and functions unit is something called titled properties of functions. All right, so what I'm going to start off here first is um, go through a couple definitions. All right, so first one here is a function. All right, so a function is a special type of relation where each element in the domain is associated with exactly one element in the range. All right, so that sounds pretty technical and whatnot. So the first thing I want to just make aware is that, let's say we have a group. These are all the possible relations. And what the first thing I want you guys to realize is that functions are a subgroup. So they're always within, it's a subgroup of relations. All right, so if you look at this, all functions are relations. However, not all relations are functions. So again, functions are like a special type of relations. All right, now the second part of this definition, it says, or it talks about domain and range, two things that you may or may not have heard of before. Okay, so domain is what we'll call the first set, and the range is the second set. All right, so if you guys recall from the last lesson, right, we were kind of the relation was associating one set with the other. Okay, so you guys can refer to the first set that you draw as the domain and the second set as the range. Okay. All right, so the key thing, in order to be a function, there for each element in the domain, so in the first set, there can only be one, it can only match up with one in the second set or the range. All right. All right, so in other words, there's only one output for every input. Okay, so yeah, and okay, and down here we actually do define the domain range. Okay, so the set of the first elements of a relation is called the domain. It's also known as your independent variable, and the set of your related second elements of a relation is called the range. This is also called the dependent variable. Right? So yeah, so bunch of definitions, technical kind of jargon here. I think it'll be a lot clearer once we go through a couple examples. All right. Cool. So the first example here is we want to consider the relation that associates a number with a prime factor of that number. Okay, so you notice here that we have 4, 2, 6, 2, 6, 3, 8, 2, and 9, 3. All right, so what we want to do here is we want to determine whether this relation is a function and why or why not. All right, so let's take a look here. Okay, so we have 4, 2. So this is the 4 would be part of the domain, and 2 would be part of the range, because that would be the second set. In other words, the 4 is what they call an independent variable, and the 2 is the dependent variable. All right. Now, to actually answer this question, I think it might be a little bit better if we actually drew an arrow diagram. All right, so I'm going to just list off the numbers of the first set. So that'd be the first number, right? 4, 6. Now 6 shows up twice, so I'm just going to write it once. 8, and 9. Now the second set, we have 2. And 2 shows up again. Then we have 3. We have 2 again. We have 3. Okay, so in the second set, we only actually have 2 distinct objects. Okay, so if I map this over, right, the 4 matches up with the 2, the 6 matches up with the 2, right, and the 6 also matches up with the 3. All right, so at this point, what you'll notice is that the 6 here, it gets mapped to two different outputs. All right, so once that happens, so if you have like an element in your domain, in the first set, that gets mapped to 2 elements in the output, then this would mean that it's not a function. Okay, so you can't have this, right? You cannot have one element in the domain or the first set being mapped to 2 separate objects in the range in the second cell. All right. Now, I can also draw. I'll draw up the rest of this. So 8, 2, and 9, 3. Okay, so this is how the arrow diagram would look like. All right, but the only spot, right? The only one of these here, like the 6 here, gets mapped to 2, the 2 and 3. Okay, so if that happens, then this is not a function. Right? You can only map it from. You can only map one element in the domain to one element in the range. All right. The 8 is okay, the 9 is okay, the 4 is okay, but it's just the 6, right? If the 6 gets mapped to 2 different spots, then it's not a function. All right. So let's just to clarify, let's just try another one here. So this time we want to consider the following relation. Okay, so these are months and these are the number of days. All right. Is this relation a function? Well, let's take a look here. So January has 31 days. February has 28 days. March has 31 days. April has 30 days. All right. So you'll notice that each one of these months, they only get mapped to a number. Even though January and March both get mapped to 31, that's okay. Right? It's just that March doesn't go to 2 different numbers, right? Or January doesn't go to 2 numbers. So each one of these months go to one number themselves. So that means that, yes, it is a function. And I'm just going to write the y. So since each month has only one option for output. All right. Hopefully that makes sense, right? So this is different from, if I scroll back up here, from this one here, right? So the 6 here in the domain got mapped to 2 and 3. Right? However, you'll notice that each one of these months, they get mapped to one number, right? Even though January and March go to 31 days, that's okay. Right? So they can go to the same, they just can't go to 2 different places. Right? So for every input, so this is called this first set is your domain or your input. You can only have one output. So for each one of these, you only have one. All right, so next one here is what is the domain? Okay, so the domain is the first circle there, the first set. So if I wanted to write it as a set, I'm just going to write out the months here. So January, February, March, and April. All right, and the range? Well, the range would be the second set. All right, that's 28, 30, and 31. All right, cool. So yeah, so that's it for the lesson for today. So again, in order for a relation to be a function, each element in the domain can only get mapped to one number or one output. All right. So they cannot go to 2 outputs. Same number cannot go to 2 outputs. So this is not a function, whereas the second example here is a function. All right, guys, cool. Hopefully that makes sense.